All right, everyone, we're back again 3 days in a row. Welcome back to the PurpleTrader Show, the crypto show to showcase the special projects in Web3 and have meaningful conversations with crypto thought leaders, builders, and creators in the space. My name is The Pug. I'll be your co-host today. Alongside me is
Andre Nazareth, the founder of PurpleTrader.
Yes. Today, we are going to continue to center our interview about centering around the social token report. Um, I'm sure if you've been watching, we've been talking to people about the social token report that we recently just released. If you're just hearing about it, the social token report aims to educate the community about the current social token ecosystem, the significant developments, emerging players, highlights from 2022, and critical things to look out for in 2023. The full report is going to be found in the description box below. I'm telling you, it's a can't miss. It will save you hundreds of hours of research and get you caught up to speed surrounding the social token ecosystem. From our last interview, we had a surprise guest, Brian Krasenstein, who is the founder of NFTs. We spoke about DSO, we spoke about creator tokens, and then today we have another special guest. We will be bringing alongside today Matt Alston, the CEO of Bonfire, a website builder that enables creators to create unique digital spaces to share exclusive content, curate an intimate experience, and engage directly with fans. Before we get into it, Andre, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, also on Tuesday, we also had a nice conversation with the founder of Kotos, that they do a lot of brand tokens. So it was very nice conversation as well. If you guys want to take a look on each of those lives, you can go to PurpleTrader account into channel into YouTube, and you're gonna see all of those videos.
Yes. We're gonna by the end of this, we'll have someone to talk about all the different types of social tokens. So let's get started. Let's bring out Matt Alston. Hey, Matt.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for
Hello.
joining us today, Matt.
You can hear me?
Yeah, I
Yep.
can hear you.
Yep,
So-
can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, so no, thanks for joining us today, Matt. Why don't you guys, give a little introduction of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Matt. I'm one of the two co-founders of Bonfire. We're a no-code platform and website builder for Web3 creators. And so we allow you to build unique digital spaces for your community, create bespoke NFT minting experiences, as well as gate content by social tokens, both fungible and non-fungible. And yeah, really just provide utility to collectors and engage with their community around Web3 assets.
Great. Matt, would you be able to dive deeper into Bonfire? Like for people that are just hearing about Bonfire for the first time, I always say, like, explain to me like I'm five. What is Bonfire like so far? Like any of the partners, funding, success stories so far, anything that can help us get a better understanding of this project?
Yeah, so we're a seed stage startup. We've been around a year and a half, raised a couple of rounds of financing, but really the product is geared towards creators. And the problem we saw a year and a half ago when we started Bonfire was just that while Web3 has all of this, potential value for creators to own the relationship they have with their fans and to just like better have control of the value that they create on platforms like YouTube, Twitter, like the Web2 platforms today. We thought that Web3 was going to be transformational, but there was still a big gap between the tools that creators are used to using in a Web2 context and what Web3 looked like at the time. And so we really wanted to build the application layer for creators to be able to actually like use those tokens that they may be minting. And so we support a variety of use cases, everything from airdropping social tokens, like of the fungible variety, to native NFT mints. But then really we focus on the utility side of the equation. So regardless of where you mint your token, you can also import to Bonfire. creators can gate audio, video, live stream content. They can create custom pages and then token gate those. And yeah, we really just focus around like the utility, or like how does a creator actually engage with their fans using Web3 assets. And so everything is kind of natively built into the platform when it comes to like token gating as well as like minting new assets. And really, we just want to be like a platform builder for creators, because really we feel like in Web3, creators are the platform, and we're just providing tools to enable that.
Got it. One of the things I was wondering. I mean, first off, it's great as a creator myself. I think it's awesome what you guys are building. One of the things I think would be helpful is if you could give some examples of creators that have been utilizing your platform and how they're doing so.
Yeah, so we had a creator really over the last week, an artist named Ali, and he released an album. So he released it in a Web3 way. And so he dropped on Sound. He's a Sound.xyz artist. We have an integration with Sound. So any drops that get uploaded there, you can just import to Bonfire, and then you can build or design kind of like a custom minting experience. And the cool part about it is because of Web3's interoperability, like that drop can be living simultaneously on Sound's front end, as well as in this case he connected a custom domain, so it was ali.works is the site. But collectors could go there to mint as well, and then there he had a whole the story of the album. You could listen to all of the music. For collectors who collected each of the first 4 tokens in the album, you could actually like unlock exclusive access to a video that he had produced for the album. And so really there was this experience he was able to build where fans could show up, they could mint the token, they could unlock extra exclusive content around the project, and then they could just listen to the project as well. And so we see a lot of artists who will use Bonfire for new music releases, whether an individual song, music NFT, or an entire like album or project. And so like that's like one concrete example recently. And then another one was a couple months ago, Adam Levy, and Mint podcast host. He created this campaign called The Vault, where like at the end of his podcast season, every season he offers like free NFTs that any fans or listeners of the podcast can mint. But then what he wanted to do at the end of season, I believe it was season 6, was create this vault of gated content. And so he curated content from like 8 thought leaders around the Web3 creator space. All of that content was then living on his Bonfire site, and collectors of the pin could then unlock access to this vault of additional content. And so those are kind of 2, I think, just example use cases that we really love. And it's just like finding new ways to leverage Web3 to do the things that it is uniquely enabling for creators, like digital ownership, like collectibles, like access to gated content, and then have that all live on a site that's branded for the creator and to the creator, and not platform.xyz/username. So that's those are a couple of examples of use cases from Bonfire.
I have one point here, Matt. Something that I really like on Bonfire is that you guys are contributing for the ecosystem. The contribution of your for the ecosystem, it's very interesting in the sense that the value of social tokens, the fungible tokens that is connected to brands, creators, it's actually utilities. We saw a big wave in a few years ago with just like communities minting tokens, and now we are seeing this this wave of utilities and much more value added to this. So I'm curious to I'm really glad to see Bonfire and what you guys are doing. And my question is, from the user perspective, what are like the type of people? I know that you're also a product guy, like you have this product mindset. So what are the types of users that today are willing to experiment, because we are still pretty early into the market? So I'm curious to see, because in one side we have the people that want to make money. They want to get the tokens. Eventually they're gonna sell. And the other side we have the fans, that people are very connected to the creator, to the musician, but they also want to make money, right? They like these incentives. So how do you see like these different segments, or is there any other types of user segments that you see that should be interested into social tokens over this year and maybe next year?
Yeah, so I think the motivation for collectors, well, I guess I should start by saying I don't think that it's one size fits all, and I do think that we're in the early innings of Web3 and what it will mean for these creative communities. And so I think, you know, for some creators, really the motivation may be to make money. For others, it may be to reward fans. For others, you know, those two things are definitely not mutually exclusive. So for a lot, it's probably both. And then for a token holder, I think the same is true. There's, you know, people who are more motivated by the potential appreciation of an asset. There are people more motivated by the utility and by, like, you know, the redeemable value of an asset. And I think the really nice thing about, you know, these tokens is, you know, they are primitives and they're programmable, and so they can really be designed to accomplish any goal that I think a creator or community has. And so right now we see, so we're very focused on, I guess, what people like to call the more, like, you know, Web3 native creator today. And we specifically focus on, well, we have definitely seen the most resonance so far with a couple of verticals, and music is definitely like the leading vertical on Bonfire today. We're also really interested in the opportunities Web3 unlocks for podcasters, video content creators, and ultimately, I think, you know, we think that the same potential is there for really all verticals of the creative class. But today, I think that we focus on more Web3 native creators because it is a big step, I think, and it's a learning curve. And, you know, to get involved in Web3, like, you're signing up for a lot of work. But we also believe that, like, working closely with these creators and helping establish, like, the case studies, you know, the best practices, like, that is then what the creator who today is not in Web3 needs to, like, see in order for them to get involved. Because ultimately, we think every creator is going to use Web3 because it promises just much better economics to them, much better control. And so we think that everyone will be involved one day, but we're choosing to start with those who have already kind of, like, you know, overcome that learning curve to get started. But I will say that for those creators, like, they still have audiences which exist across Web2 and Web3. And so we're still very focused on how does a creator onboard their fans into this new world? How do they show fans the value or potential value in Web3 for them? Because we certainly don't think it's all about, you know, all about the creator. It's, you know, we really think it's a Pareto benefit. It's better for creators and fans to be able to interact directly and be able to, you know, have these assets which can represent ownership. And so maybe long-winded way of answering your question, but I think that it's still early. So we don't have any, like, prescriptive like ways that creators should use these assets, but we certainly, like, want to create as much experimentation as we can to, like, learn alongside creators, like, what are some of the best use cases and best practices here. But yeah, that's kind of like how we see it today. Like, we're very focused on the more Web3 native creator, but then helping them onboard a community that probably is not Web3 native.
Andre, that answer your question?
Yep. Nice.
You may be muted.
Going back to the creator, for for like maybe like I say, quote unquote, a Web2 creator, what are some trends that you're seeing in the creator space in general that could provide some tips and maybe some insight of where the creator industry is going, and maybe that could better prepare themselves to enter this space?
Yeah. Well, I think one trend that seems relatively undeniable at this point is that the major Web2 social networks, so TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, they're becoming increasingly recommendation media, which I mean to say just that it's all algorithmically controlled, and thus, that can be extremely great for discovery. So like the TikTok algorithm does an amazing job of, surfacing content to somebody who may have never heard of a creator. And, they kind of use the entire, like library of content on the platform as like the source for that, and then it's all algorithmically driven. There's like very little of a real like social or like user to user network that is influencing that. And so I think like in a world where like everything is driven by these recommendation algorithms, I think those platforms are still like really, really powerful tools to be discovered and to grow your audience. But increasingly, like, you don't have those platforms as a like deterministic way to reach your fans. It's like, you're going to upload content like on TikTok. It's by no means a guarantee that content ever gets shown to your followers. And thus, like, without some channel of communication or some way to build a direct relationship, you end up, I think, becoming increasingly beholden to these algorithms and to the platforms. And so I think one trend that we're seeing is, TikTok showed, I think, Meta and the other big platforms that there's actually a ton of value in leaning more into the algorithmically driven kind of like feed experience. And so they're all kind of like now chasing down TikTok, and everything is becoming more and more algorithmic, which I think is an opportunity for creators to still use that as the place that they are growing their top of funnel. But I think increasingly they're going to need platforms that give them control and that they can like interact with those super fans in a way that is deterministic, that is like not intermediated by an algorithm at all. So that's like, I think, a trend that we are seeing where increasingly you're regardless of whether you're in Web3 or use Web3 kind of as your toolkit or not, I think increasingly like creators are going to need platforms where they can guarantee that when they post something, it's going to go to those fans. And so I think that that's a trend that does lend itself really nicely into Web3, because sort of one approach that I think is compelling is, use Web2 for your top of funnel, use Web3 for engaging, like deepening engagement and monetizing your super fans. Like they're kind of not mutually exclusive, and it's not either or. I think it's really like a layering where, for those people who are diehards, for the people who are those biggest fans, like, give them a place where they can interact directly with you, where you can reward them for their fandom, and also they can get more than they're able to get on the platforms that exist today. So I think like that is certainly a trend that I anticipate will continue and even accelerate. And I think it's going to just create more and more of a void when it comes to these like small communities, these places where you really feel a sense of belonging, and you feel like, you are like a part of something, and where the creator has like the ability to engage directly with you in a way that, isn't governed by some algorithm that sits in the middle.
Interesting. It's an interesting way to call the current Web2 like media things as recommendation media, because I really, when you think about it, it's very true now. Like we don't realize it, but everything is just recommendation, and it's kind of scary.
It's like you open an app and content just comes to
Yeah.
you, and it's like that's your whole experience. And yeah, I think like in that world, it's like
It's
you don't have control.
But so to stay on the creators, let's talk about the creator token industry as a whole in general, because with the with the report, like our findings were that the the creator token still, infrastructure's there, everything is being built, but still we're not seeing that growth that we're seeing with, say, fan tokens or community tokens. So my question to you is, what do you see like the future of the creator token industry? How do you see it evolving, even specifically with what happened to the rally? That was a huge blow. But what are your thoughts?
And you mean specifically fungible assets, right?
That's a good question, because we're seeing an increase of non-fungible tokens that creators are using. So let creator tokens, for this purposes, let's talk about fungible.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean,
and just a point, maybe you can extend to utility tokens. So could connect with a few NFTs as well. But I think essentially fungible, but utility in general would be interesting to see.
Okay, yeah, because we certainly have sort of broadened our definition of social token to encompass both. But I think, sticking on the more fungible side. So my background is as a product manager at Uber, and there I was working on loyalty and rewards, and so got to kind of be a part of launching the initial version of Uber Rewards, and then we work really closely, with the team at Starbucks Loyalty, and we have a partnership with Amex, or at least had one at the time, and so we got to see just how like Web2 loyalty and incentive programs like are designed and built, and what are the best practices there. And I still think that fungible assets are an incredibly powerful tool, and I think that there are a few things that they do that non-fungible assets really just don't do very effectively. And I think earning is a key mechanism which doesn't really exist in any meaningful way, I would say, in Web3 today. Like almost every asset is purchased, or like you are seeing an increasing number of like airdrops or like free NFTs, which are that way of earning. But I think that fungibility allows you to like stack tokens. It allows you to like accrue a balance that then in turn allows a creator to like see a positional ranking of like who are the biggest holders, and people can kind of like earn and accrue over time. It also means that you can set like tiers or milestones in that earning journey. This is something that every single loyalty program in a Web2 context does, and they do it for good reason. There's a lot of effectiveness in that approach. But I think that type of a dynamic does require fungibility, because you do want tokens to be fungible such that they can stack and you can like build them. And if you want it to exist as like a medium of exchange within a community, so you're actually able to like spend tokens or buy things with your tokens from a creator, then fungible assets do that a whole lot better. But I think that to date, what we've seen is that there's also a ton of challenges with fungible tokens that NFTs don't really have to face. It's a lot more complexity. You're basically like, you kind of are defining the monetary kind of like, you're defining the supply. You have to provision liquidity somehow if you want that for your community. And so it's much, much harder, I think, to design like an economy around a fungible asset, whereas like NFTs kind of, it's more binary. It's, has an image or audio or video attached to it. So it's a little more like emotionally resonant. And so I think that like, it's a much simpler tool. And I think that I won't speak too much directly to Rally, but I think what fungible tokens have struggled with so far is just like, how do you solve all of that complexity? Like, how do you enable liquidity, but not like invite speculation? Or like, how do you kind of control, the supply and demand of these assets? Like, there's also obviously the regulatory concerns, and like the fact that fungible assets, like I think exist a little bit more in a gray area today than NFTs do. And so I think that none of those things are an indictment of fungible tokens as like a powerful tool. Like, in gaming, every in-game currency is a fungible asset. So it's like experience, like, which is the thing that you need in order to like level up. Within loyalty programs, like usually there's at least one, if not two, kind of like fungible assets. One's maybe a spendable point, and another is maybe like, your like airline miles, or like they like unlock tiers and benefits. And so I think that all of those dynamics require fungibility, and I think that those will become a lot more popular within Web3 as well. But I think that first we have to solve some of these like challenges, because you're not existing in a closed ecosystem as like, you know, if you're the issuer of a fungible token, it's not that you control like all elements of that, which is the case for like a Web2 company building a loyalty program. Instead, you exist in this open environment where like, you know, people are going to speculate on that asset, and there's not a ton you can do to control that. You know, people are going to be able to spin up a liquidity pool, like, you know, with or without your endorsement. And so I think like fungible tokens have just run into a lot more roadblocks, and I think it's going to take a little bit longer to get there. I don't think though that you know, you can unlock the full power of Web3 using only non-fungible assets. I also think that there's a world where it's like not every creator necessarily needs to have their own token, but I think that like, you know, platforms may have tokens that creators can sort of adopt within the context of that platform, or creators will like form collectives, and maybe like that collective has a fungible token, but you know, it's not in any one creator's like name or likeness. And I think where we have seen, you mentioned like fan tokens and community tokens, like I think that really those are examples where there has been more success already. And I think it just sort of like goes to show that, you know, we shouldn't necessarily think about creator tokens maybe the way that the V1 sort of, I guess, wave did. Like maybe they really are better as a community asset, or, you know, as an asset like within an ecosystem where, you know, many creators are involved. In that way, there's not one that's, you know, needing to figure out monetary policy and, you know, figure out like all of the complexities of what it means to have a token. And so, yeah, I would say that like it's taking longer to get there, but at least personally, I'm still very bullish, just because I've seen like how much power some of these concepts that are uniquely enabled by fungible tokens, like how much power those have. And so I think like earning is probably like the prime example in my mind.
It's a lot to digest there. Andre, is there anything you want to comment before I say anything?
Nope, you can move. It's very interesting, like your approach. Like, okay, social tokens can bring more value, like because of the fungibility, but there's also some challenges around UX or legal, or some understanding about liquidity from the creator side. I think there are few areas like fun tokens, for instance, in sports, that they already have bigger fan base, and they are really inclined to not only to get access to utility, but also to the speculation side. And yeah, so I think it's gonna maybe depends on which area maybe. And I like it to see that you're working a lot with the music segment. What are other segments that you see that maybe get traction on social tokens, like on top of sports and musics?
Yeah,
Musician.
sorry, before I answer that, I just wanted to make sure, like, how do you define fan token? Does that mean like, you know, for like a football club, or I guess like, yeah, like what in your definition is like the difference between like a creator token and a fan token?
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, here's the way that we see. Like, we see social tokens. All social tokens is a fungible. They're fungible tokens primarily, and then we see three different categories. We see the creator tokens, which is focused on an individual. We see the community tokens, like ApeCoin, Bankless, which is like DAOs, but they are more social DAOs. It's not really a protocol. And then we see the brand tokens or fun tokens, which it's like, which different compared to community tokens. Like community tokens is more like for the community, it's more a DAO that is not controllable for an entity. But fun tokens, brand tokens, there is some company behind on focusing on the utility. And fun tokens more specifically was a term from Chilis, the blockchain that have created many sport clubs tokens.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm following. Cool. And then your question was like, what other types of creators do I think this
types of segments in social tokens in general that you see as like a potential growth over in short term?
Yes. So I think having those definitions, I guess like just to slightly reframe my previous answer, I think that a lot of creator tokens will really evolve more into like the fan token model where or a community token where there is some sort of broader interest or broader like management of it so that it's not all in a creator's it's not like entirely theirs as like the issuer and like designer of said asset. So I think that like then to answer the question, I think that really like all forms of like content creators, I think can benefit from the potential of fungible assets, like to, incentivize and reward engagement, to like be able to like give value back to those people who have been most loyal or most engaged or created the most value for them. And it may be the case that in some instances, they're like, effectively borrowing an existing fungible token instead of minting their own, like in their own name. But I think that like podcasting is definitely like a segment that we think is really interesting, largely because of just the dynamics in that segment where today, like because most of podcasting outside of Spotify is using RSS, like you don't really get much data like at all about who is, listening, who's consuming. I think podcasts also tend to be like, very interest based. Like, most podcast shows are going to have like a very specific focus or topic. And so I think like naturally, then you're going to aggregate a bunch of people who care about that thing or care about that topic. And so I think podcasters being able to, for example, like start to understand who are their super fans through like earning mechanics, be able to build communities where right now it's very much like, you upload and publish to an RSS feed. People then consume like on any number of platforms and it's just sort of like it's out in the void once you like publish an episode. I think like having there be, a tokenized community around that episode where like fans are able to engage with one another. Maybe they're able to like, unlock exclusive like, extra content or behind the scenes content, or maybe they get earlier access. I think like all of those ideas are really, really interesting and compelling, especially just given how under monetized podcasting is as a segment. And then the other one I would call out is like live streamers. I think the idea of a social token is not foreign at all to any live streamer because, every live streamer is going to be using Twitch. Twitch has all sorts of like fungible and non-fungible kind of currencies in their ecosystem, except that they're all just like closed ecosystem. And so I think being able to turn those into real on-chain assets like has a ton of value for live streamers. And so I think like the live format, like having everyone be there synchronously is a really interesting format to enable all kinds of like social dynamics. Like you see, in Twitch chats, you'll see people gifting subs and tipping and like, buying emotes. And it's not a huge stretch to imagine those things being fungible and non-fungible assets on chain instead of, something that's in a closed ecosystem. So those are two segments that I think we're especially interested in outside of music. And I think that, gaming's another one that's obvious, not a focus for us, but we think that really like there are a lot of segments for whom this is not a stretch when the UX improves. But obviously today there's a million hoops you have to jump through, and gas fees are prohibitively expensive. And so, it's not trivial to get involved today, but we do think as like the tooling gets built out, as the applications kind of reach maturity, that there are segments for whom this makes like obvious sense and really is a no-brainer.
Interesting. Never thought of that before. Podcasting in particular, that's something to take from this. I'm sure we'll think about that one.
Podcast. Yeah, I think I mean maybe it's because I'm a huge podcast fan, but I think it's really interesting what you're starting to see, like Bankless and Mint and Rehash. Like there's a handful of Web3 native podcasts that are starting to dabble in tokenization, and I think it's interesting to see like just extrapolate what that might look like, in 1, 2, 3 years time.
Agree. Matt, let's move on now. Let's move on to the. We're curious. The major takeaways from the social token report. You have any that you want to bring on board and maybe ask us or just talk about in general?
I mean, I would be very curious to get y'all's take maybe on the creator token question. Like if there's sort of a diagnosis that you have or any insights that you feel like you gleaned on why that category like hasn't taken off yet. I think maybe the takeaway I had was, well, maybe one takeaway was just that I think increasingly I'm starting to view social tokens as almost like as like an evolution for a community, where it's like it's not always the easiest place to start, but I think as communities scale and like as they get bigger and more defined, and at some point if you've been using like non-fungible assets, like that starts to, I think, hit its breaking limits at some point, where it's like just minting new collections, like it gets hard to manage all of those different assets. And you then see like Ape as a good example of like, well, the Ape coin is like now this like asset that kind of expands the community. It's a lot easier to get one Ape coin than it is to get a Bored Ape NFT. But also I think that it then unlocks all sorts of new behaviors and like new capabilities that like NFTs alone can't do. So that was like one takeaway I had. But I'm curious, like if you guys had any like takeaways in terms of like what would make or what have maybe been holding back creator tokens to date.
I have my own personal thoughts. Andre, do you have anything you want to say, or you want me to?
Yeah, just a few points. Like it depends on the platform that we are talking about. Like if you look into DSO, we saw a lot of issues with the bounding curve to be very inclined. So a lot of people were like bump and dump and just doing like speculation, which was a bad thing for the whole community. Now they are changing for a different mechanics, which is going to be the creator coin version 2, which I'm pretty bullish. They're going to change the bounding curve. They're going to relaunch the social tokens. But it's still like you can see a lot of creators, including Krasenstein that we spoke yesterday, like a few creators doing like $100 in just one post because people were kind of like enjoying the content that they were creating. But for others, and in general, I still believe that the utility of layers they haven't implemented in the right way, either because like the user experience to get access to that tokens there's still a barrier. Like some people, they don't want to use MetaMask, they don't know how to use, they are just scared about crypto in general. And I strongly believe as that this market is gonna have a change once we're gonna see some platforms implementing a seamless way of engaging with those utilities, so people can even notice whether they are in Web 2 or Web 3, but they are there because they are being incentivized. They are also enjoying the utility. So that's my point. But if we compare, for instance, like fund tokens, they also had some challenges in terms of user experience. They also had some challenges in terms of utilities, but they took off. I think Chili's in general did a great job of working in partnership with the sports teams, which they were able to use their current base of fund tokens to leverage their tokens. So the whole process of doing the token launch to engage with the real funds, connections with exchanges like tier one exchanges, so they could make sure that people get liquidity as well. So this whole system in place helping us to get the traction that we see today. Of course, it is still not enough. Like if you see what Chile is doing, like they are working with a lot of partners to increase their ecosystem. But I think it was a great first years for them, and show us the potential, show us some path for us to apply to other segments as well. So that's how I see companies like Bonfire, like Seed Club, and a few other partners, like to either helping with tools, but also helping with knowledge. How can you launch your tokens? How can you create interesting utility? How can you engage with your fan base? Those I think are elements that a few companies are doing, and they're probably in the right direction in my point of view.
That's really interesting.
To add, because I know we're getting on on time here, Matt. I want to be respectful of your time. Just to quickly add, before we get to the last question, this is something I'm curious, since you run a creator-focused company. As a creator myself, I've also worked with many creators, and I think one thing is what I found from the report and just diving into it is that creators just want to create at the end of the day. And all this like crazy jargon and all this like trying to listen, I work with a musician, and the musician even just trying to manage himself, find a venue, now try to have a social token and manage an ecosystem. It's like, it's crazy. So the thing I'm seeing is communities and fan tokens, they run well because there's like an army behind it. When there's so much pressure put on the creator to have to the accountability aspect of having to make sure they are able to do what they're saying, it's a lot on top of all the other stuff they have to do. And I don't know if creator tokens will ever hit that mark until we consider these types of things for creators. And that was just like my biggest takeaway from that is I don't know if we're thinking about how creators think, because also marketing, right? Marketing for creators, marketing is a headache, and they don't want to do that. That's
100%. I mean, I think if I was a Manchester City player, like this is where I actually think like I maybe can kind of conflate that segmentation within social tokens, but like I would probably just rather use the Man City token. And like if I wanted to, do some cool drop or activation, like I can kind of adopt, the community token that my fans care about. And maybe that's a lot easier than minting my own token. And it's like, that's why I do agree that like an individual creator, like they want to create, and it's so much work to like issue a token. And I think that's why you'll end up seeing like maybe not one per individual, but maybe you'll see like one per ecosystem, and then the creators in that ecosystem can adopt that token. And it's like, if I can go buy some on a market and I can airdrop it to my fans, like in return for engaging with my content, or maybe like I'm actually given some monthly from the club because like they want to incentivize players to like treat this token as their own. I think like you may end up seeing that type of like collation instead of like every person like needing to like manage their own.
That's a good takeaway from there. It's something to think about. Matt, I want to be respectful though, because we said we'll get you in 45 minutes. We're at 45 minutes. So the last question we have, which we ask everyone, is the biggest lessons you've learned so far working in this space?
Think long term and like take chances, like experiment. I think like thinking short term in this space, I think is such a trap, and you see people fall into that trap time and time again. It's like, you know, we're building for a 10-year horizon. And then I think in a world where there are no best practices and no playbooks, like, you know, we're creating them. And so we encourage creators we work with to, you know, be experimental. Like we try to be experimental, and we try to just, you know, have an emergent strategy that kind of is very much dictated by what we're seeing in the space and like learning as we go. So those are maybe my my two biggest lessons or takeaways.
Awesome, Matt. Well, we appreciate you coming on board and sharing what you're doing at Bonfire. I think, you know, like we mentioned, we think what you're doing is great. What you and your team are doing for the creator community and Web3. And we just want to thank you again for coming on board.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Andre, anything last minute?
No, thank you very much, Matt.
Thanks.
All right, Matt, take care.
See ya.
So Andre, don't leave yet. Like last time. Let me just remove Matt. Yep.
We are live.
Yep, we're still live. So Andre, anything, you know, before we conclude, any last remarks you want to say to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think was pretty interesting, the conversation, to see his views on podcast and the music industry. I think it was quite interesting because we were kind of like very focused on sports, gamers, and community in generals, and he brought a lot of optimism into this creator community. So it was really really insightful to see his thoughts on this. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more, Andre. Some things like you mentioned with the podcast, and also a community. Maybe the future for creator tokens is a community token for all. We don't know, but it's something to consider. That said, we're wrapping up. We appreciate everyone that will be watching this and who stayed in to watch it live. If you haven't already, make sure to check out our social token report. I'm telling you guys and women, it's going to save you hundreds of hours of research. We put a lot of time into it, so you don't have to do any research. All you got to do is download it. It's free, and you will learn some nice and some stuff that we didn't even know is happening, such as like fan token growth. So it will be in the description below. And until next time, thank you all for watching.
Thank you.